Hello, and welcome to this week's edition of the Scrimshaw Show. My name is Scrimshaw. Thanks for listening. On this week's edition of the podcast, we're going to be talking about Ontario a bit. We're going to be digging into some Canadian polling. Digging in might be a little strong. We'll be talking about some Canada polling. And I think most importantly, though, we're going to be talking about a few of the columns I've written recently. Partially because, well, I'm arrogant and I want to talk about them, but also because I think they matter a lot for a conversation about how to move forward and what the, next few years are going to look like. I think having a coherent mind about where we're going might be helpful. On Tuesday night, I'm recording this Wednesday, 6:36 is what I'm currently at right now, Eastern time. Tuesday night, I wrote a column about Frank Graves. It was a column about Pierre Poilievre and his electability, but it was also a column about Frank Graves, founder of Ecos Research, supposed smart person about Canadian politics, and noted person who tweets deranged shit late at night and then deletes it the next morning. Because a couple weeks ago now, I think, might have been last week, I don't really remember, Graves tweeted some deranged shit about how he is going to stop Pierre Poilievre from ever becoming prime minister. How he, and he alone, will ensure that Poilievre does not become prime minister. And then he deleted the tweet. And then he had to do an interview with the National Post about it. And I wrote a column. The column was mean. It was. But the thing is, it was right. It was, in the sort of just Poilievre electability, the basic thrust of the piece, if you haven't seen it, was Poilievre is going to blow himself up anyways because he doesn't have this great electability argument anyways. So Graves can fuck off for acting like he has to be our protector. But also, fuck you, Frank. I'm sorry, you and your fucking machine of Laurentian elites are going to stop the people from electing who you want? Are you fucking kidding me? You arrogant, conceited asshole that you think that you, can stop the Canadian people from electing Pierre Poilievre if that's what they want to do. But also, that would be a good thing? That some fucking nobody TV panelist and pollster could be the one determining Canadian elections? Do you not have any concept of how fucking arrogant it is for you to say that? So clearly, I'm not the world's biggest fan of Frank Graves. I'm not the biggest fan of Frank Graves' polling either because, frankly, if you trust Frank Graves' polling, you end up in situations where you end up flipping between chaos and certainty that the Liberals will be fine to certainty the Liberals are going to lose with stunning frequency. His unreleased daily track in 2019, which he would occasionally release snippets of, apparently had the Conservatives in majority government territory at the height of the SNC scandal, which I remember the Lean Toss-Up model at the time where I used to work, obviously. Toss-Up never had the Conservatives close, and I believe they exactly had one model run with the Conservatives, even in plurality position. Graves' polling was volatile, to say the least, going from, I remember one time, it was like a 9-point Liberal lead in Ontario to a 2-point Conservative lead in the span of Fridays. I remember the meltdown that ensued at that point. His polling in 2021 was equally deranged, with him and friend of the show, Keto Maggie, and the Main Street lads being the two people who led all of the Conservatives are definitely going to win panic in the summer of 2021. To be clear, they didn't say that, but that's how all of Twitter took their comments because, well, Twitter's dumb. And the thing is that I put Frank Graves' name in the headline. I'm not running from it. And I knew if he saw the piece, he'd block me on Twitter, which he did. But he did it at the same time as retweeting a bunch of people and picking fights with a bunch of newly created Twitter bots in support of Pierre Poilievre. And the funny thing is, he says, like, oh, if I were Poilievre, I wouldn't have engaged with somebody like me. Like, what are you doing, man? And I'm like, no, you wouldn't, Frank, because every fucking night you get in your booze and you get in your weed and you get stoned and tweet dumb shit and then, like, expect us to forget that you had a 17-point Liberal lead in Ontario 2 nights out from Election Day? Like, I'm sorry. Are we supposed to forget that, Frank? They won by 4. With a 17-point lead. Are we supposed to forget the fact that in 2019, you guys had a 10-point lead for the Liberals in Quebec when they ended up winning it by 2? When your poll, had it been strictly accurate, would have shown a Liberal majority government because of the size of the lead in Ontario and the size of the lead in Quebec? I mean, I know your C projection was fine, but your C projection was very good in large part because you guys, when you did your C projection, had everyone else's details to work with, and you knew that your Ontario lead, that your Quebec lead, sorry, in 2019 was full of shit. Are we supposed to forget that you had the PPC near or at 10%? And you had the Tories at like 27% of the vote? Are we supposed to forget that? No. But the problem is, we get these people, get these pollsters in Canada, right? Who, they're good pollsters, they're bad pollsters, I don't really care to fight it. Nick Nanos, Frank Graves, and Daryl Bricker. I have the honor of being blocked by all 3 of those men, whose opinions are shit. Whose polls are whose opinions are shit. And the thing about all of this, and the difference between someone like Graves and someone like Keto Maggie, Keto was not the world's biggest fan of my piece on Ontario last week. Keto responded fairly. I think some of his complaints were a little over the top. But whatever, it's a free country. He's allowed to disagree with the points I'm making. Next time I write about Ontario, which will probably be Thursday, because I assume Main Street will put out a new update to their thing, and I'll use that as an excuse, I will lay out the arguments he's making in his response in my piece. Because that's a reasonable thing to do when facing reasonable criticism, right? And by the way, it's also entirely possible that Main Street next week, that Main Street's response, I guess this week, not next week, will be more in line with their results last week, and last week's result will have been a volatility-induced, overly optimistic, PC sample, which is, I think, tentatively what I would expect it to be. Which would in some ways invalidate the whole point of me, which would both prove my column correct and also prove that, all this stuff doesn't matter in a sense. But the thing I keep coming back to is I wrote that column knowing Frank Graves is going to block me for it. And I wrote it anyways. I've written a lot of media criticism recently. And I'm aware of the fact that every time you call out the CBC or CTV or any of the major newspapers, you run the risk of losing an audience within those news organizations. Not that I was ever going to get a panel job on any of these places, or not that I was ever going to be asked to write for any of their websites or whatever, but to the extent that whatever micro 0.00001% chance I ever had, that chance probably goes to 0 because of the way you do, because of my willingness to say critical things about the state of the Canadian media. It's fun. Again, I as much as some people might want to be nice and say, "Oh, I deserve, I deserve a panel job on CBC or whatever." No, I'm just an asshole with opinions. But the thing I keep coming back to is I wrote that column knowing there would be consequence, right? I wrote that column fully expecting Graves to block me on Twitter for it. And the thing I don't the thing that's interesting about doing that, just as an exercise, is like, you're not surprised when the consequence comes, and you're not frustrated even. You're just sort of like, well, okay, that's the price of doing business. And the thing I don't like, and the thing I don't think is good, is that I'm not an enemy of Frank Graves. I'm not an enemy of Frank Graves' stated belief that Pierre Poilievre is a danger to this country. I do not want Skippy to be Prime Minister of this country. I don't. But what we're getting to is a situation where, for someone who claims to understand the fundamental problems underlining the rise of the populist right, the death of the moderate middle, and of the, consequences for these things, the center, and let's be honest, the Laurentian elite, of which Graves is very clearly an undeniable member. And, I mean, so am I, right? University educated in the city of Ottawa. I've literally lived in the sort of like, in the Toronto to Quebec City corridor my entire life, right? Like, if anyone's a, I guess, aspiring member of the Laurentian elite, it's me. But there's a sort of fundamental question of, like, why on earth does Frank Graves think he has the right to tell this country what to do, right? What does Frank Graves think that he, and he alone, has some power or some ability to dictate terms to a country? And I guess even beyond that, why does Frank Graves think that blocking me is going to help him accomplish that goal, right? Because the problem with all of this, and the problem with Pierre Poilievre's basic campaign, is that he is trying to get rid of a left-right argument. He is trying to pit the elites against the people, right? He is basically running a Corbynist for the people campaign with radically different solutions to the problems, but his complaints about the elite center and the powerful and gatekeepers, I mean, they're basically just Corbynomics. His solutions are, again, radically different. But his railing against institutions could come out of the playbook of any leftist, far left leader, right? Him, Sanders, Corbyn get in a room, they're all railing against the system. They're all talking about how the people aren't in the room, how it's a powerful, cabal, how it's corporations, and how it's, gatekeepers, whatever words you want to use, right? Corbynism, at its core, was, yes, a rally for power to the people. But it was also just basically railing against the Oxford, Cambridge elite. What was the Sorkin line about the Vietnam War from the West Wing via, I think it was Ainsley Hayes, right? That the DC chapter of the Harvard Alumni, Association was how the Americans got into war, right? Like, this sort of populist anger is fundamentally about elitist fucks thinking they're better than Joe Blow. So how on earth does Frank Graves declaring war on Pierre Poilievre and saying that he and he alone won't let Skippy become prime minister, how does that help fucking anything? And how does blocking me, the only person who apparently will fucking tell Frank what the hell he needs to hear, which is maybe put your fucking phone away when you get into when you drink your drink and you smoke your smokes. The thing I don't get, right? Like, the thing I don't understand about any of this is that if your goal is to get rid of Pierre Poilievre, right? If your goal is to beat Pierre Poilievre, how is giving him and his audience exactly what they fear, which is to say that there is an elitist cabal who are going to stop you from ever electing the person you want. How in the name of fuck is that good politics? How does that help your cause, Frank? Oh, wait, it doesn't, and you know it because you deleted the tweet when you were sober. And this is the thing I don't understand. I don't understand why people make dumb decisions. I don't understand, even more than I don't understand why people make dumb decisions, because, like, who cares? Like, they're dumb decisions, just let them be dumb. Sure, fine. But what I don't get is, why are there no consequences for you fucking this up? Right? I knew that Graves was going to block me for the article. I stand by every word. And the thing I don't get is, if you claim to be one of Canada's leaders in understanding populism, how are you so goddamn stupid as to not understand that everything that you are doing undermines populism? Sorry, helps populism and undermines the virtue of the center, right? How do you not get that? We are literally at the time when the sort of populist position is in the ascendancy, and for everyone saying, yeah, but Marine Le Pen lost by 16, 17, whatever it was. Yeah, sure. She lost by 32 last time. Like, this is still an impressive, like, the far right is gaining in France. That's an undeniable statement. It's the statement of the bleeding obvious. And also, yes, it is impressive that the far right can get 42% of the vote, 41.5%, I guess, in a country whose electoral system is designed intentionally to stop the fringe from getting power. The French literally designed their presidential system to stop the extremes. They stopped it. They designed it to actually stop the French communists, and it's now just had the effect of stopping the Le Pen family. But that was what it was originally there for. And the thing I don't get is, and the thing I'll never understand is, if you can't handle me writing a critical Substack, how in the name of hell are you going to stop Pierre Poilievre becoming Prime Minister? If you don't have the stones, the cojones, the testicular fortitude to handle a critical Substack article, how in the name of all that is holy are you going to handle Pierre fucking Poilievre? How are you going to stop him, Frank? Think about it, because you don't have an answer, and I know you don't have an answer, and that's what makes this so fucking stupid. I guess the day most of you are listening, this will be Thursday. The Ontario budget's today. I don't know what's in it because I'm recording it beforehand. Also, I don't care what's in it because unless they're going to give me free money, which I'd be a big fan of, I don't care. Now, if you would like to give me money, I will take it and vote against you. I know a fair number of people who greatly appreciate Doug Ford giving them their license plate renewal fees back for 2 years and are taking Doug's money, greatly appreciate it, think it's absolutely moronic and in no way are voting for them. So, that one seems to, I'm hoping that that's a quite common attribute. Or attitude, I guess, not attribute. But the thing I don't have a lot of interesting things to say about Ontario that I haven't already said. I think if the Liberals are going to make mistakes, they're going to make them in a similar way to the way they always make mistakes. Which is to say, by prioritizing dumb shit, by talking too much about COVID, the same things I've written about for months, right? I think the people who focus too much on vote splitting are potentially intentionally, but are certainly just misunderstanding what the actual problem is. Thinking that you can just redirect any seat where the PCs have under 50% of the vote and just be like, well, if I add up the Greens and the NDP and the Liberals, like, herp derp, like, yeah, because that's really, like, how this works. And also, like, not every Liberal would prioritize the Ontario NDP over the PCs. I think we got that lesson learned pretty clearly last time, right? A lot of them did. Plenty of them didn't. But the thing I sort of keep coming back to is I think a lot about the fiction I've written for, I think fairly obvious reasons. But the thing I sort of come back to is that you learn a lot about how to do it, right? You learn a lot about the process the more you do it. And some of the first fiction writing I wrote, it's unreleased, I wrote it before Salvation. It's like bad. Like the story's good, the characters are good. It's just like badly written crap. Even Salvation, when I read the stuff that I've written after it, I'm like, this isn't nearly as good. Just because I didn't know what I was doing yet. And the thing is, Tom Mulcair had no idea how to run a campaign from second place against a Conservative majority government. He just didn't know how to do that. It's not a skill that NDP leaders have at their disposal. And so, yeah, he didn't know what he was doing, right? And he ran to the center and, he didn't have good answers to most questions. He was out of his depth in most situations. But he didn't know how to run that campaign because no New Democrat had ever been in a situation in a 3-party politics, right? Yes, I know there had been, new Democratic oppositions in the West or whatever, but again, not in the same way. This situation where it's really hard to know how to run a modern campaign when you've just supplanted the Liberals and you're running against a Conservative majority. And the problem is Mulcair didn't know what he was doing. He just plainly didn't. That's why Justin Trudeau won a majority government. The problem is that Stephen Del Duca has learned all of the lessons of Justin Trudeau. The Liberals have been, I think, running a good campaign so far. Not a great one, not a perfect one, but I think they've run a good campaign so far. They're rolling out, a policy every few days. They're keeping themselves in the news cycle. They're giving it out drip, drip, drip. Right? They're feeding the news beast. And then the Ontario NDP just come out and drop their entire platform in a day. A month before they have to. For nothing. There was no point. There was no need. But, there's a couple of fairly transformative things in there. I guess I'm happy with their electoral reform commitment. But, the problem is that the NDP doesn't know what they're doing because they still get outflanked. Because they're going to get outflanked by the Liberals, right? They don't have the juicy childcare rebate in there. Liberal policy in a lot of areas has been, I think, pretty good, right? The minimum wage stuff was good. The gig economy stuff was decent. I assume the Liberals are saving the housing announcements and the climate announcements for moving forward, for the time moving forward. But the NDP just dropped it all on day one. They don't know what they're doing. They fundamentally have no idea what they're doing, and it's worse when you fuck it up the second time around. It's worse when you fuck up, when you have the roadmap and you still fuck it up, right? If Salvation, which I still think is good, to be clear, it's still, I'm still very proud of it, but clearly I'm a better writer now than I was then, right? I'm a better column writer now than I was at my first columns at Lindosip or whatever, right? But part of the greatness of Lindosip is that I was just allowed to write a column or 2 columns a day for 15 months, 16 months, however long I was there, right? And the thing about being given that freedom, the thing about that ability was just I got a lot better at writing by the end of it than I was at the beginning. Put aside the quality of the take, right? Put aside whether I was right or wrong. The quality of the writing is better. The quality of the writing is better. Of my Substack articles is better now than the day I launched. And the thing about all of this in the podcast will be better in a month than it is now, right? The more I record these solo podcasts, the more I do it, the better I will get at this specific skill. And the thing I sort of keep coming back to, and I don't know, in a sense I don't even know how to communicate this properly, is the Ontario NDP should know better by now, because they've done it before. They have had the path before, and they're still screwing it up, right? And the thing that I guess is going to kill me forever is, there were 3 polls last week. The NDP were on 23, 23, and 21.7, if I'm remembering the numbers correctly. They have clearly fallen into third with all 3 of Ipsos, Abacus, and Main Street. We haven't had Leger in a while, but I suspect that given where we were, given the changes in the polls that we have had, I suspect that would be the case again with them. And the thing I keep coming back to with the NDP is they don't know what they're doing. And the thing about not knowing what you're doing, the thing about not being in position to know what you're doing, is you end up in a situation where you end up selling your voters a bill of goods. You end up screwing over people who need you quite badly. Because there are places where only New Democrats can win. Right? There are places where a truly diligent NDP would be better, right? Am I the world's most enthusiastic New Democratic supporter right now? Or Liberal supporter right now? No. You think I fully trust Stephen Del Duca? A man who was a member of a government that I, actively did not want to win the 2018 election? No. I wasn't then, and I'm not now. And the thing is that we're in a situation where the Ontario NDP's failure is both extremely high level comedy, right? They suck so badly that you end up in a situation where they're going to have blown this great opportunity. But we're also in this situation where the NDP in theory should be a great force in Canadian politics. It should be very important, both federally and in Ontario, right? If nothing else, there are valuable ideas that come from having a second left party, right? Some of the greatest ideas in Canadian history, right? The CPP, Medicare, Farm and Dental, right? The Liberals have been pushed to these positions by the NDP. And that's good. That's important and that's valuable. Even childcare, yeah. Right? These are ideas with a tradition of New Democratic support and of New Democratic ideals. There's a legacy in this country of principal minority parties. Right? Even in the UK, independence of the Bank of England was a Lib Dem idea that Blair and Brown stole. Right? This legacy is an important legacy. But even more than the importance of the legacy is, it's a force for good moving forward, too. I'm not someone who just thinks only about the past and only about where to go from here. But the thing I'm going to keep coming back to, and the thing I think I will forever come back to, is the Ontario NDP knew the second time around. They knew what their biggest risk was. They knew the game plan. They knew what to avoid. And they fucked it up anyways. And that's really bad. And it's a failure that not only hurts in what is the point of Andrew Horwath? What is the point of, anything sense? But even more than that, it's a failure. It's a failure of a legacy, man. It's a failure for a party that should have an important role in this country and in this province. And their failure is going to end up hurting people who need them and need them quite badly. And it is to the great shame of Andrew Horwath and of every other Ontario New Democrat that this country and this province has been failed so badly by their tenure in office. And frankly, third place. They have earned their place back in third place and back to political uselessness. That's all I have for today's episode. I'm waiting for the Ontario writ to come, and I'm gonna try and line up a couple of long form interviews once we get a better sense of where we are and where we might be going. Follow me on Twitter at Scrimshaw. Follow the Scrimshaw Show on Twitter at Scrimshaw_show. Subscribe to this YouTube channel. Like this video. Buy my book, Salvation in the Storm. And read all of my work over at scrimshawunscripted.substack.com. If you like this episode of the podcast, let me know. Tweet me. Retweet the show on Twitter. Share it around. Help out a new struggling podcaster in his time of need. Anyways, have a great rest of the week, and hopefully Doug Ford doesn't say anything, or the Ontario PCs don't say anything too crazy in the budget to make me have to record a special thing, or make me have to write some emergency podcast or emergency column tomorrow night. Have a good one, y'all.